Welcome to the second meeting of Those Were the Days. I'm Nancy Martin, the library archivist. Those Were the Days is a monthly meeting for people attending both in person and via Zoom that will be held at 11 a.m. on the second Thursday of each month for as long as there is interest. I very much enjoyed our first get together, in which we talked mostly about the restaurants of Peters Township. When I asked those in attendance about future topics of interest, they mentioned Township Farms and the Farm Fair. So that's what I've put together in a presentation for this month's meeting. Here we have a color print of the original black and white drawing of Hervey McMurray's Willow Grove farm that appears in Caldwell's Illustrated Combination Centennial Atlas of Washington County, Pennsylvania from 1876. The archives has a copy of both the original 1876 atlas, which is in terrible condition and so not available to the public, and of the 1976 reprint of the original atlas, which is open to the public. If you turned onto Thomas Road from McMurray Road, Willow Grove Farm was just on your left. Here we have a photographic image of Locust Grove Farm, which was owned by Hervey's older brother William. You might know it as the Lutz Farm. It was located on the right side of Thomas Road, just past the Crossroads Church of Christ and before Johnston Road. I'm not sure of the exact date of this image, but it was created from a glass plate negative. Glass plate negatives stopped being produced in the 1920s, so the image is at least 100 years old, but could be older. Here we have an image of the construction of a barn on the Frobe farm in 1901 or 1902. The picture was donated to the archives by Richard Frobe, Earl Frobe's son, so I'm assuming that this is a barn on the farm of the Frobe Road Frobes, George and Elizabeth, and not the Scenic Valley Golf Course Frobes, but I could be wrong. The caption on the back of the photograph identifies John Zimmerman, Clarence Patterson, and Boyer Patterson as the builders of the barn. I'm guessing they're the three men perched atop the crossbeam at the apex of the barn. Here's a wonderful photograph of Earl Frobe ringing the dinner bell on his family's farm. He has a cat sitting on his lap. Standing beside him is Howard Hines. The photograph is undated, but I know that Howard was born in 1908 and Earl in 1909, and I think Howard looks to be about 7 or 8 here. Here's another photograph from the Frobe family papers. This one was taken in 1915. At the plow is Earl's older brother Albert, who died from tubercular meningitis in 1929. Albert was born in 1896, so he's about 18 here. Earl is perched on the plow, this time with a dog, not a cat, and Reynolds is holding the reins. The caption on the back of the photograph reads, "Plowing for wheat." Here's a photograph of a framed photo of the Donaldson farm that hung in the living room of the family's house. Donaldson's Crossroads was named for the family, and the farmhouse stood at the intersection of Route 19 and McMurray Road until it was demolished in 2010 to make way for a retail complex. I don't know how many of you have heard of the Peters Township Society of Farm Women. They were the local chapter of a state organization. The group was formed in 1918 and held themed monthly meetings at one another's homes. The goal of the society was to provide farm women with the opportunity to socialize and to learn. Here's a photograph of the Peters Township Society of Farm Women members circa 1925 from one of their scrapbooks held by the archives. The scrapbooks were donated by Tim Trax just last year. Here's an image of the Cheeseman farmhouse that was located on Route 19 just north of Donaldson's Crossroads. The house appears empty in the photograph. I read in a 1956 Observer Reporter article that the Cheeseman farmland on the east side of Route 19 became the grounds of Forest Lawn Garden Cemetery. I believe the house stood where Levin Furniture is now. Here are images from the 1960s of the burning of J.C. Sproul's house on J. Elmer Johnston's farm to make way for the new high school that opened in 1968. I'm sure some of you remember this. We'll actually be coming back to J.C. Sproul's in a few slides. Another area farm was the McDowell farm, located where the McDowell shops now stand on Route 19. The SM in the McDowell farm name apparently stood for Samuel McMillan. SM was born in North Strabane in 1895 and died in 1988. These photographs were taken by Samuel Liebarger in 1972. And here's a painting of the McDowell Farm by Bob Chamberlain, a local resident of Peters Township and winner of the 1976 logo design for the township, the ubiquitous arrowhead. And now, on to the annual Peters Township Farm Fair. Here we have a newspaper article from 1946 about the farm fair from a Peters Township Society of Farm Women scrapbook. The article mentions it is the third annual fair, which means the first fair was held in 1944. It also mentions that the 1946 fair was the first to be held over 2 days. By the 1950s, it was up to three. Poultry, livestock, baked goods, flowers, and farm crops were all judged. The farm was sponsored by the Peters Township Protective Association. The article also mentions a horseshoe pitching contest, a livestock parade, a band concert, and a square dance. Here we have, from the same year, a newspaper photograph of Fair Chairman Joseph McMurray on the left, Secretary Robert Chambers in the center, and Chris Hodensfield, President of the Peters Township Protective Association, which sponsored the fair, on the right. And here's a photograph of J.C. Sproul's, I told you he'd show up again, with his best team in harness winners. The same two horses also won Best Mare and Second Best Gelding. Here's a picture of twins Richard and Ruth Fulton, children of William Fulton, posing with a cornucopia of vegetables and fruits at the 1946 fair. And here we have a newspaper article from August of 1954, again from a Society of Farm Women scrapbook. It proclaims Beverly Howard of Bridgeville as the farm queen. I had assumed the queen had to be a Peters Township resident, but I guess that wasn't the case. Here's a photograph taken by Sam Liebarger of the 1956 Farm Fair. And here's another. Here are images of the front and back covers of the 1958 Peters Township Farm Fair program. Here's the schedule of events for the 3 days of the 1958 fair. Thursday, August 14th was Women's Day. Its events included the grand opening, judging of entries, children's races, inside exhibits, a grand parade at 7 p.m., the crowning of the Fair Queen, a horse and pony show, a horse pulling contest that Gary mentioned last month. Friday, August 15th was Family Day. Its events included a pet show, a baseball game, a 4 H club exhibition of projects, a fashion show, and a horse show. Saturday, August 16th was Grange and Youth Day. Its events included main tent exhibits, a cooking school, a fashion show, another horse pulling contest, a horse show, drawing of prizes, and the closing. These are some of the ribbons won by the Frobe family over the years at the Peters Township Farm Fair. The earliest ribbons in the Frobe family papers that I could find are from 1944, which I mentioned earlier was the first year of the farm fair. The last ribbons in the Frobe collection date from 1959. If you want to know more about the farm fair and haven't already seen the Stories from the Archives program created by Margaret Dietzer and Carrie Weaver, it is available on the library's YouTube page. Feel free to give it a look. That's it for me. Thank you for joining. I hoped you learned more about the township's farms and farm fair. Thank you.